Greetings, everyone, and welcome to another discussion run by the International Community of Iranian Academics. I am Negar Pato, and I'm accompanying my good friend and colleague, Dr. Ensia Erfani, in discussing the situations in Iran, and particularly in relations to the situation of universities. In this conversation, we aim to examine the alarming trends of arrests and executions of students and university professors in Iran, particularly since the beginning of the recent war. This discussion is intended not only to document and analyze these developments, but also to raise public awareness and draw attention to the deeply troubling dimensions of this state violence. So today we are discussing four important topic and the questions. My first question to Dr. Erfani is, since the onset of the recent war, what a specific pattern can be observed in the arrest and executions of students and university professors in Iran? And what implications do these patterns have for academic and university life?
No, thanks
Thank
a
you for
lot.
joining us.
Yeah, thanks a lot, dear Nagar, for this opportunity. And we are really sad talking about these kind of the discussions because it seems that the case of the Iran is completely severe issue because we all have the pressure from the protests that happened in Iran and also during the war that both sides shows that the regime is just using both cases, just putting more suppression and pressure in the case of the academics. Just going back to a little bit to the history, we know that the protests started in Iran end of December and then just amplified during the January, and in 8th, 9th January we hear that the massacre that happened in Iran, that even some reports saying that maybe up to the more than 40,000 people have been killed there. And due to these protests, the universities completely shut down in Iran and they were not running in a really ordinary way. And after that, universities were open just for 5 days that the war started in Iran. So that shows that even with the closure of the universities in Iran, we also see the rest of the students that even that they participated in the protest during the protest and also after the protest that they did inside of the universities. And unfortunately, after the really these fragile ceasefire that happened, we hear that the execution have been started in Iran. So, and also we have seen that traces of the execution that happened even for the students and for the scholars. That looks really weird because after the revolution in Iran, we had such kind of the execution that the students and even the scholars have been executed, but that pattern never continued in a really severe way that we see that not the number of the students that have been executed and hang out in just last few weeks is just increasing. So the pattern shows that the government is not really caring about the label of the students and also the concerns coming from the scientific community or the organizations that they are looking forward for the violation of the academic freedom and also the rights of the higher education. So that makes me really worry, and also the international community of the Iranian academics to really raise awareness about this severe condition.
Yeah, I also noticed that in the past 7, 8 weeks, what has been happening in Iran. It's not just a series of like isolated incident and execution. It's a it's a systematic and deliberate pattern of state violence that they want to impose on universities because they are very worried about universities. They're worried about any form of gathering, but particularly universities, academic community, and intellectual. Many of them are civil society actor, and that worries the states even more. Now, what we have from published records, it says that there are students at graduate level have been executed. Some of them were arrested even before 2 years ago, and then they are rearrested and executed. And there are like execution of several political and security prisoners who have been staying, their cases have not been completed, or the trials have not been fair. These are all news that comes associated with it. It seems like the state has intentionally wants to say that it can undermine any sorts of civil laws and its own regulations and laws, and have these kind of theatrical forced confessions and trials to scare people. I in some of the reports I have been reading, there is numerous students and academics have simultaneously faced arrest. They face solitary confinement. They have pressure to confess under duress, and they have faced security threats. Their family have faced security threats in the context of war, and of course the broader securitization of the country. This pattern is effectively a mechanism for instilling fear and silencing independent voices, and actually severing the link between university and as a social critic, because as you know better than me, and you probably can give us a little bit more details, they have been struggling to have university classes and online. They don't know whatever. So what's happening with the university classes and the presence of students, and how does it impact universities?
Yeah, the point is that when all the protests happen in Iran, so it doesn't matter that where the protest is happening. We know that the university, especially the university students, are in the front line of the doing the protests inside of the campus of the university. So the regime always gets worried about that, and we heard in the history of the Iran also that the cultural revolution that happened for 3 years, and that the university were closed in the beginning of the revolution in 1980. But after that, the university was almost calmed down because there was also no protest in the country. But we are heard about the protests in 2009, that several students have been arrested, and after that in the several other protests. But the point is that in all these protests, the universities were not really shut down, for complete time. But the main signal that happened after the women life freedom movement, that we also traced really carefully what's happening inside of the universities of Iran, and also the protests also lasted longer than the other ones, almost for 4 months. And even when the protests were calmed down in the streets, the universities still protesting, the students are going to strike, not participating in their exams. And those days we recorded that more than 1,000 students, they lost their right for education. The universities were shut down. Even the faculty members also have been fired. The statistics shows that more than 100 of them have been fired. They lost their right for teaching, and also their contracts has been suspended. And after 4 years, we don't even see that many of them, they couldn't return back to the universities. So that started from the women life freedom movement. But those days, the students also have been arrested. They also get the trials of the going detentions to the and going to the prison for few years. But now what we are seeing is that they arrest the students, and the penalty is going to be the execution, which is something really rare happening there. Especially that, because we know that the many students that they have been arrested also during the women life freedom, they didn't arrested inside of the protests inside the campuses. Several of them also arrested outside of the universities. But even by that case also, they none of them they got really severe condition if we compare it with the execution. So what is happening right now is completely really strange issue that's happening. And also one of the severe things that's happening right now in Iran is the internet blackout, that we are now in the 75 days. And although there is a ceasefire for more than 30 days, because the regime always mentioned that we are in war, and it's a security condition, it's a really critical issue for us, and that's why we really block out the internet. But now, almost more than a month after the ceasefire, we still see that the people of Iran, they don't have access to internet. There's some faculty members, they get the access to the internet, of course, but the point is that the students, they don't have this kind of the access, especially the graduate students, that they really need having the access to the internet to communicate with the scientific community. And also many of them, they submitted the papers, they are looking for the reviews of their papers and articles. And many of them, wanted to apply for the positions, doesn't matter what positions, for continuing their education or participate in the conferences. So that has been also completely suspended. And the other also issues that because of the war, many embassies also have been closed in Iran. So there is even no way to scientific communication, even if you be able to have that access to the internet. There is no embassy to applying for visas. And the other also is that the flights also has been suspended. So it was really, really complicated, even for the students that they travel to Iran during the January holidays. They, because of the protest that happened, even the flights will have been canceled and they couldn't come back for their research places abroad. So what is happening in Iran has a really, really complicated situation, many, many dimensions that are affecting the daily life of the people, including the students, and also their education, because the internet connection, even the internal one, is not really stable. So then that point is that the education is not really running in a good way. And I should also mention something that in some universities are not public universities, so they are private universities that you should pay for your education there, and it's not really easy for the families with this economical condition to pay for the tuition fee for the students. So, and also unfortunately, these students, they are not receiving, the quality of the education, but they are still forced to pay for their education. Otherwise, they will not be able to continue and register for the following semester. So it shows that the quality of the education dropped a lot in Iran, but unfortunately, the regime is still insisting on the internet blackout, and also for the enforcement of the paying for the education if you are not involved in the public universities. But as I mentioned, the severe pattern that we see is the execution, that we should go to talk about the details, that how many students have been executed and why that makes us really worry.
Sure, let's go back to executions and then we come back again about the other punishment policies that the Islamic republics have actually conducted, especially in the context of internet blackouts. But let's go back to the numbers. So the International Community of Iranian Academics was talking about a number around 29 students that they have recorded to be executed. Am I correct?
So the number 29 is really big. Actually, the number that we already have, that if we could really prove that they are the students, because the point is that one of the severe things that right now is happening is that the regime is not even announcing that who have been executed. So there is almost no information from these students coming out. And also the point is that the internet is blocked out, so you don't really have an access to the information to really realize that what's going on. So whatever we just collected was by the other medias, that they have more access to the information coming up from Iran. But the main pattern started in after the war that happened in June. That was the 12-day war, and the first execution that one scholar have been involved was in the August 6th. That Ruzbeh Wadi has been executed, and in the report it was mentioned that he was working for the nuclear agency of Iran. And then the reason for his execution, as the state, as the regime of Iran mentioned, that was that he was involved in sending the information for the Israeli government, and that's why he has been executed. So we don't really have that much information from that person, and because in general, the nuclear agency of Iran is really the security place, so it's not really easy even to trace the background of the people that they're working there. But the death has been announced, and it was really severe condition that regime also executing the scholars and also the scientists that they are working for them. The other severe issue that happened was in December 20. Before the protest happened in Iran, it was Aqil Keshavarz, 27-year-old. He also has been executed with the same reason, that because in all of these cases that I'm gonna say, there is something in common. The regime is saying that they are doing this spying for the enemies, especially for the Israel and the US, and especially during the war, that since if they have done such kind of the activity, so the penalty should be the execution. So the another alarming things that happened for us was for the students that they've been arrested during the protests that happened in January. And as I said, we know that more than 40,000 of people have been killed, but the number of the arrested one is much, much larger, and some statistics show that maybe even more than 100,000 of people have been arrested. And since Iran is a really young country, for sure many of them were the students. At least we can also trace from the number of the people have been killed that they were really young. The range of their ages was from 20 up to 30. So among them, of course, also there were many students. But one of the severe cases that happened, that's why that makes me really worried about that, was the execution of Amir Hossein Hatami, 18 years old student, that happened in April 2nd. So that was a really big alarm that the regime executed an 18 years old student. And just 3 days later, another execution happened. Muhammad Amin Biglari, 19 years old students also has been executed. And the point is that we don't really have enough information about the university that they have studied, the subject that they have studied. So that these are the information that we cannot really confirm, but it's completely clear that they were the students. So that has been confirmed. The other issue that happened was in just few days ago, in 11th of May, that Irfan Shakurzadeh, 29-year-old, also a student, have been arrested. He was the student, the master student. Actually, he was one of the really elites of Iran, because he had a chance to continue the education abroad, but he preferred to stay in Iran. And he was arrested also long before. It was not during the protests in January. But as I mentioned, the regime is just for threatening the people, and of course trying to avoid the following protest, that it's really reasonable that's going to happen for several reasons. They just doing this execution, and unfortunately this time he doesn't care about the position of these people that have been arrested. So doesn't matter that they are students, they are scholars, or in which age they are. So it's just for the threatening. So that's why that makes me really worried about the situation that's happening. And also main concern is that unfortunately none of the organizations in the support of the academic freedom, in support of the students, they don't really announce these kind of the issues. They don't make advocacy, they don't make awareness, and of course they don't condemn the regime for such kind of execution that's happening. So that puts us too much responsibility on the case of the ICOYA to really raise awareness about these issues, because if the scientific communities cannot really understand this severe pattern of the execution of the students and scholars in Iran, it means that really human rights issue is really in danger, especially in the scientific community, that we don't really care about the execution of the students, because we know the reports of the students that they have been arrested in the other countries. And there were many organizations that are really doing the advocacy for them, supporting them, condemning the states, and also writing the letters and statements for their release. But in the case of the Iran, that execution happens, nobody really talk about that. Even our trials to really making the awareness about this kind of the issue was not really successful. So that's why we wanted to make the awareness about this situation. Then we maybe scientific community we realize that that's their duty to speak up. Otherwise, this pattern will continue.
It's very important what you said. I just wanted to complement your discussions with a couple of points that shows the urgency of the situation we talk about. Okay, so historically, these executions happen, not regularly, but it happened. It went up and down due to the troubles that the Islamic Republic was into. But often, for example, the government or another organizations would come in and play a role of a facade mediator to just stop the executions or reduce the number of executions. But this time, not only that, everybody applaud the Minister of Justice for actually the head of the judiciary system for actually using execution as a deterrent and as a punishment for students, but also in one of the most shocking news was that in May for 2026, there were 63 members of Iran's parliament issued a statement thanking the judiciary for the execution, and especially because for the executions of some of the January protesters, and asked the head of judiciary to take decisive, public, and exemplary action against them because they are now all has been labeled with betraying, with a traitor to the country. In most of the cases, I have heard that they write it in very conservative reports, publications in the Islamic Republic, that they confiscate their belongings, they threaten their families, and they are fully supporting the the judiciary system for these executions. So it's now a very well lubricated machine of oppression that has no even intermediate or any form of organization within Iran who can help or mediate or reduce the numbers. So the Iran situation is very securitized in that sense. Because as you mentioned, because of all the political situations that has been happening, the war, the Strait of Hormuz, and all of these major political issues, many of the genuine NGOs and players who support scholars at risk now take as the position of silence because they think that it is less threatening or less worrying or concerning. Maybe they can be away from being the target of criticism or causing a trouble that can cause more diplomatic issues between their country and the Islamic Republic. So now we are left, as you mentioned, and say we are left as civil societies who are fighting and trying to stop this execution, to raise awareness. And sometimes many of us feel that we are just screaming in a long, dark tunnel that just hear the echo of our voices. But I think that this is important to note to the community, to the intellectual and to the scholarly community, that this is a very dangerous pattern that can spread very quickly to other countries with authoritarian regimes, and we do have many of them. And with that, you have a situation where the scholars are at risk more and more on daily basis. One of the things that I have always learned is that authoritarian systems learn from each other. In a lot of cases, they actually read each other's security policies, they follow each other's path, they look to see who was successful or more successful, and they do have role models too. So in this situation, they have been thinking about how to do that in other contexts as well. And this is a very, very dangerous pattern that we have been thinking about and are worrying about. And see, let's go back to our discussions about these students and think about what you see would happen in the shorter term in Iran. If you're going to think about how what would be the solution? How can help, or would you see any difference in near future?
Yeah, before answering this question, I just wanted to mention about the number that you mentioned in the previous question about 29 people have been executed. Actually, 29 have been executed among the protests that have been arrested during the protest, but not all of them were the students. So that number is true, but that was the whole execution that happened after the protest in Iran. So that's true. So that also makes it also really severe because after the Women Life Freedom movement, also few protesters have been executed, but the number was not that high. Of course, every life is really matters, but that shows that the suppression in Iran is really increasing in a really severe way. That's a really alarming signal that the regime is doing it, and that also shows that how many protests have been arrested. That now the number of them that they face the execution also increasing in respect to the ones that they also have been arrested in comparison to the other protests that we had before that one. Regarding the issues that how scientific community could you really support and how is the situation in Iran, it's completely clear that inside of Iran, all the voices have been silenced. We know that although the internet has been blocked out, but some specific people that have an access to the internet, the ones that they are supporting the narrative of the regime. So it's really completely clear that they are just putting their own narrative on social media, the ones that they are part of the regime and they are supporting that. And even several faculty members now, they have an access to the internet. They are also supporting the regime, or if they are not supporting the regime, they know that their access to the internet is controlling by the regime, so their activities in the social media and all these things is really controlled. So if they are even against of the regime, they have no really chance to really speak up. So we don't expect from the people of Iran, from the scientific community of Iran, to really talking about this situation. Of course, when the universities have been attacked in Iran during the war, that several of them have been attacked really severely and then by purpose. And also the Israeli government also confirmed that they really did this kind of the attacks, that we really condemn that, because the scientific places and education centers should be completely kept neutral in the case of the crisis. But the point is that there were many scholars from Iran that they really write the statements and they condemn that issue because that was how they are supporting the regime. So everybody is really condemning that. So that doesn't matter that you are in part of the regime or not. But the point is that none of these scholars, even the ones that they are working abroad, even the international scholars that who sign such kind of the letters and statements, they never signed a statement or letter or whatever in support of in just condemning the violation of the academic freedom in Iran, or talking about the situation that Iranian scholars are facing. So that's why that makes us worry, because you have the concerns about the buildings that have been destroyed, because at the end the university campuses are the building. Of course they are the facilities, the labs, also instruments there, but the point is that you can always reach all these instruments by having the budget in future. And also we know that the infrastructure in Iran, the universities are really, really old-fashioned ones. So whatever just really destroyed were really old technologies and all these stuff that could be really accessible in many, many places really easily. So if you are condemning the attacks of the University of Iran and you are worried about the buildings, about the science facilities, that it's also tied to the life of the academics in Iran, also the students, why you don't care about the situation of the students and that have been arrested, that they have been hanged, and also during the war, even during the war,
Mhm.
with all internet blackout, we also receiving the messages that several students have been arrested. Although there is no protest, the university are completely shut down, but they are also spying, the students, that they had some such kind of the activities, not even in social media, because as I said, the internet is blocked out in Iran, but they are really threatening the students, or that we are controlling you. Even a few days ago, some of the students have been arrested. So that shows that in scientific community, unfortunately, they don't really care about these kind of the things. And as you also mentioned, that the countries that they are not democratic, they always learn from each other. So if we keep silent right now in the case of the Iran, that pattern could also happen in other places as well. And that's why that makes us more sad and also more cautious about the situation that's happening right now in Iran. So it could be like the model for the other places to realize that if we keep silence, the suppression will be increased.
Yes, I completely agree. Almost all academics, international academics who have been talking about this war and about the situations, they often talk about very high level of politics, and they never think about the life of students who are waiting for a reception, who are waiting for a letter from a university, who can potentially lose 2, 3 years of their most valuable years due to some disagreements or war or an authoritarian regime who is killing people and your classmates. So these are the tragedies of living in those circumstances that we don't see that. Many of our colleagues, many of us have lived into the situations that we lost friends due to the brutality of violence of the regime. Uh, we have many of us have friends who had to leave their jobs. You, for example, NCA as well, have to leave the comfort of the jobs. For years we study and sometimes we have to leave. There are hundreds, thousands of us around the world. So we all kind of have to deal with the system of trauma. And this helps us to see beyond those high level of politics. But I think it is important for us as academics, and this is why we do record these sessions in ICOYA, to actually have raise awareness in civil society. So if you listening to our voices and if you're hearing us, please spread the news, raise awareness, talk about these issues, let us hear it again. Maybe together we can actually find a solution. But to that point, NC, I wanted to tell us, if we were living in an ideal world, what role could the communities, human rights organizations, or academic networks could play in documenting these abuses or in actually addressing these issues?
Yeah, when it comes to the scientific point of view, because as a scientist, we are always looking for the evidence-based information to really rely on that. But we should accept that, the situation of Iran is completely exceptional situation. So when the internet is shut down, when you are working with the regime that blocks all the connections and information spread from a country, and even threatening the ones that they are activists outside of Iran by threatening themselves directly or their families inside of the country. So you cannot really expect to really receiving the evidence-based information from Iran, even when there is evidence-based information. Because during the protest, regime confirmed for the first time that 3,117 have been killed during the protest. The biggest number that you have seen in the pattern of any of the street protests that happened during the centuries in the world. And among those ones, even the Ministry of the Higher Education in Iran, Science and Technology in Iran, mentioned that 100 of them been students. For the first time, the regime confirmed that they have been killed as students. So, of course, they didn't publish the names of them, of the universities or the degree that they are studying. But they confirmed that among the ones that they have been killed, even among the 3,000 that they claiming that that was the right number, that I'm sure that the number is much, much higher than this one. 100 of them have been students. And then when we are approaching to the organizations in supporting the academic freedom and all this stuff, they don't even trying to put these kind of the information in their reports or condemning by writing something in their media or in their newsletter saying that we are worried and we are confirming that, and even the regime of Iran confirmed that 100 of these have been killed. I'm just asking a really simple questions. Do you know any event in this world that 100 students have been died just by normal issue, for example, like natural issues that could happen, like I don't know, earthquake, like flood,
And
like
never made international news?
yeah.
No.
That never happened, that 100 students from a country have been died for any reason, in an accident or whatever. But in Iran, they are killing the students, and even the regime of the Iran also confirming that number that has been happened. And as I said, the number could be much, much higher, because during the women life freedom protest that almost 500 people have been killed. At ICOYA, we recorded that 25 of them were students. So imagine that if you can compare these information with the ones that they are happening right now, I'm sure that the number is much, much higher. But as I just wanted to mention that in the case of some exceptional situations like Iran, we should be really understand that that's exceptional situation first, and second, we should also act it immediately, because we see that the number of the execution, the timeline that's happening for them is really, really severe. And also in the case of the Iran, we see this pattern which is completely new, is that the trials are happening too fast. We don't have any information from the trials, even no information from the person who are facing the execution. and the execution are happening too fast after the arrest. Because, for example, in the case of the Amir Hossein Hatami, who was the first student have been executed after the protest, his trial, his execution just happened 87 days after his arrest. So I'm just wondering that how one can really see that the justice happening just 80 days after the arrest. How you collect the information for proving that that person was involved in a situation that the penalty could be an execution. So what is happening in the case of the Iran is exceptional. That's why our action also should be exceptional. We should not just follow the same policy and same criteria we are also using for the different countries. And also my big question is that when you are doing advocacy for the students that they have been arrested or they have been detained in the other countries just for a few months, so you speak up. But in the case of the Iranian students that they have been killed, and also, of course, many of them that they are still living in Iran, they are arrested, and also they are under pressure, and we don't really know that how many students are going to be executed, because as I said, we don't know the number of the arrested one, and we don't know how many of them are the students. So that pattern should continue. As we mentioned, 29 of the protests have already been executed. Three of them were students right now, and that makes a really big signal, because we just wanted to mention that, of course, the regime of Iran is the regime of the execution. There is no doubt on that. Because if you go to the history of the regime of Iran, you see that many such kind of the mass executions happen in Iran. But what is happening right now is that the students and also the scholars and scientists are also part of that issue. And that's our responsibility as a scientific community. Of course, among the ones that have been arrested and executed, there are also the other categories also as well there. For example, athletes or even artists. But the point is that as a scientific community, international community of Iranian academics, our main goal is just making the awareness about the situation of the students. And I really want to, I don't know how one can wake up the ones that they really want to just keep sleeping by just legitimizing this regime by silencing, because we know that in the case of the regime of the Iran, silence just give them more power, because they see that nobody is really talking about this kind of issue. And that makes me really sad that in the case of the Iranian scholars, you always have the really severe protocols that who is going to come to your conferences, who is going to be your collaborator because of the security issues. But when it comes to the life of the students and life of the human beings, you just keep silent, and you don't question this issue, not individually and not also from your scientific community. And also the next step will be the questioning your states that why they are continue their collaboration with the Iranian regime, and even the scientific collaboration is still continuing with the Ministry of the Education in Iran. So how that could happen, that even your scientific community are keeping this kind of the collaboration with the projects that the regime of the Iran is directly involved with this one. So that these are the patterns that should really warn the scientific community. And as I said, the situation of the Iran is exceptional, so the actions also should be exceptional.
Can I also add something to your talk? One of the principles of us being academics is to create accountability. So, for example, we push our students to not to plagiarize. We use all different techniques because we want an argument to have somebody who is accountable for the responsibility of that argument. We want accountability. So, one of the things that always surprises me is that if accountability is one of the principles of academia, how can we not apply this into situations and cases where students who are the actual valuable and the most valuable part of higher education have been executed, killed, tortured, solitary confinement, um, forced confessions, and their families are being threatened, their assets have been confiscated. So they go through all this tragedies and violations of their rights, and many of the conventions that the Islamic Republic has signed itself in the United Nations, and nobody make them accountable. So I think one of the one of the issues that I would like to encourage the intellectual community, the global intellectual community, is scholars, academics to pay attention to these issues, is not only for the case of Iran, which, as you mentioned, is the most important and unique, and we need to address that from so many different humanitarian perspectives, but we also need to stay strong and loyal and faithful to our own principles and make power accountable, because this is one of the reasons that we have quite a lot of proud of being in academia, why is standing on the side of the truth rather than to the side of the power. So I think it is very important. So we are thank you and grateful for you to listen to us tonight. Thank you very much, NCA. Would you like to add any more comments to your discussions?
No, thanks a lot, Negar. And you mentioned also a really great part about the principles in academia. That's really, really important because at the end, even as a scientist and students, we are human beings. So we should also take care about humanity in general. So it doesn't matter that who we are, if we are the Nobel laureates that really reaching the high level of the education and scientific issue. And then we should really take care about the humanity, because if we, raise the humanity from all the aspects of our life, we are not really human. So there are our world could be similar to like the animal farm. And unfortunately, what we are really facing right now is similar to that one, that we see that we are not really equal, even when it comes to the scientific issues. That, of course, the Iranian scholars, they always, and students, they always face the many, many restrictions and discriminations just because of they have the Iranian nationalities. Even the ones that they left the country, they are even living in exile. They are facing many, many challenges, even now that they are not living in Iran. And we also face such kind of issues. But the main severe issue is that we are seeing the execution of the students in Iran that never happened in none of the countries in the world. And unfortunately, nobody really take care about that. Just wanted to mention that we as a scientist, without humanity, we are just nothing from my point of view. So then humanity should be prior to anything that we are working on, even the science. Without humanity, even science has no value, at least from my point of view. Thank you a lot for this opportunity, and I really hope that that makes a little bit awareness about what's going on inside Iran.
Thank you, and so please listen to us. We will try to come back to you every couple of weeks to update you about what's happening in Iran and raise awareness. So please listen to our videos. Make sure that you can distribute them. If you can, we are grateful. And until we see you next time, thank you very much.